Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we are going to be talking about the next issue in the ongoing Spawn series, Spawn number 12. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in July of 1993, we can see here on the cover that it's actually very minimalist. I would say this is probably the least detailed cover of the first 12 issues of Spawn. Though I do really like it. It does a really good job of conveying a very important story point that happens within the pages of this book. But I am a little bit surprised at the fact that you can see here the quote-unquote Spawn logo in the middle is not centered. It's very close to the left side and the spine, while being much further away from the opening portion of the book. And at first I thought maybe that was just an issue with the way that the cut happened or whatnot, in the way that it was running on the press or whatnot, and they were cutting the pages. But that can't be the case, because as you can see, the Spawn logo and the Image logo are perfectly aligned to where they need to be on the page. So this was just printed off center for some reason. I don't know where that mistake happened, if it was just an error on the print run, or perhaps maybe something to do with the way the layouts happened. I'm not sure, because I don't know exactly how printing happened at this point in the game with the comic book industry. So a little bit of speculation here and there, but I'm just kind of surprised that it's such a minimal, perfect circle logo that it's not centered up in the middle of the page. Story and art, Todd McFarlane. Letters and editor, Tom Orzechowski. Color, Steve Oliff, Ruben Rude, and Ali Optics. We can see here on the first page Spawn sitting atop of the same cathedral that he has found himself drawn to throughout the course of the comic thus far. And it's really just kind of giving a quick overview of how Spawn came into his powers and what happened to, kind of spur him to be where he's at this point. Just kind of a little bit of a refresher course, I suppose. And this is kind of important, I suppose, as well, because of issues 10, issues 9, 10, and 11, all kind of throwing a wrench in a lot of the story. Issue 10 specifically, with the whole, weird thing with him and Cerebus, and giving a bit of an opinionated commentary, I guess I would say, about the comic industry at that time. And we find out in this book that was actually Spawn being in purgatory for a period of time after he grabbed the lance when Angela disappeared and left it behind on Earth. If you'd like to know more about the story references that I'm making right now, please feel free to go back and watch those videos. I do have a Spawn playlist. A lot of the story points in this issue really kind of don't make sense unless you know what was going on in those issues. And then issue 11 just kind of is its own standalone thing for the most part. It sort of briefly gets referenced in this book, but in terms of how it affects the overall Spawn narrative and story, it's not really that important. Here on the next page, we see a 2-page vertical splash that I want to be mad at because of it being vertical, but I can't, because the artwork is so top-notch. This is fantastic. This is such a gorgeous 2-page spread. Once again, a really detailed look at Spawn on top of the same cathedral that he keeps finding himself drawn to, trying to figure out what it is about this cathedral that keeps drawing him here. Unfortunately, his memories are still very scattered, and having gone to purgatory doesn't seem to have helped much in terms of his cognitive abilities and his ability to recall his past. This is a refreshing thing to see, honestly. The artwork in issue number 11, I felt was, I don't want to say lackluster, that's not really the right word, but very much, Todd was taking some shortcuts. About a third of the panels in that book had no backgrounds. And I really just think it was because of Todd being really pressed for time. Even in this book, he's doing the, page layouts, he's doing the artwork, meaning the pencils, he's doing the inks, and he's doing the cover. That's a lot to ask of someone who's also, one of the figureheads of an entire comic book publishing company. And then they're trying to do all that on top of it, which, kudos to Todd for doing his best to try and, keep up with a schedule like that. But it's really kind of untenable for anybody to be able to do that, which is why this is issue number 12. He's only got 3 more issues as the principal artist of Spawn. And in issue number 16, Greg Capullo takes over as the primary artist for Spawn and would stay that way until issue 100. But I think it just came down to Todd realizing that trying to, come up with the entire story and write it and also draw it and ink it and draw and ink a cover is not realistic for any one person to be able to pull off. We then see Spawn trying to put pieces together in his mind, remembering his own wedding, which was the only time during his life on Earth that he ever was actually inside of a church, being that Al Simmons was a very stalwart atheist. He doesn't know if this will necessarily lead him to any answers, but he is also very comforted by one of the happiest moments of his life, recalling how beautiful and in love he was with Wanda, and how their wedding day was almost a blur to him because he was so enamored at her beauty and his feelings for her. Also recalling a conversation that he had with Wanda's grandmother, who is blind, but she never let that get in her way. It's something that Al always admired about her, was that despite her inability to see, she lived a full and happy life and was one of the brightest and most positive people that he ever knew while he was alive as Al Simmons. But then we also see that Spawn is really struggling to come to grips with the fact that his best friend, Terry Fitzgerald, married Wanda after he died, and that the two of them are now together, and that, he was able to give Wanda the child that Al never could. And it just really weighs on him. And he knows deep down that, neither of them really did anything wrong. He was gone. It's been 5 years since his death. And the two of them just happened to find each other. And despite knowing that, he still illustrates that he almost feels as though he's been cheated on, despite the fact that that's not the case at all. It's a really interesting way of trying to illustrate the emotional heartache that Spawn is dealing with, even though none of the people that he loved and cared about in the world of the living are aware that he's even back in the world. They're all moved on with their lives, thinking that, Al Simmons is gone forever. We're then teleported to Washington, D.C., where we see the exterior of a building that is operated by the CIA, and are then taken into the office of one Jason Wynn, who was Spawn/Al Simmons' direct superior in the CIA, in the military, the one that Al was doing all the dirty work for, as he's being briefed by one of his subordinates about the different problems that they've been encountering in their offices and also in their weapons caches. Now, for those of you who have been watching up until this point, or just remember the story, Spawn broke into a very secure site to steal weapons, to fight Overkill, the mafia cyborg, and also was able to gain some intelligence information by hacking some files at one of their offices. Now, of course, Jason Wynn and the rest of the CIA have absolutely no idea that Al Simmons has been resurrected as Spawn, and they also have no knowledge of Spawn's existence as a whole. So they've come to the conclusion that it's Terry Fitzgerald who is behind all of these things, and that he is being somewhat manipulated by Wanda Blake, as she was very outspoken after Al's death that she believed the CIA had a hand in it. And for a short period of time, Terry was on the same kind of kick as her, kind of believing that something had been done wrong on their part. However, he was given information to kind of put those thoughts to rest, and he made a formal apology. However, they believe now that because the two of them have been married, that Wanda is pushing him to reopen all these ideas and start looking again. So now Jason Wynn has decided that he is going to send some agents over to Terry and Wanda's home to basically make it known that he's a person of interest and that they've got their eyes on him. We're then teleported to the exterior of the home of Granny Blake as we see Spawn approaching the house. She realizes that someone is there despite the fact that she can't see, and Spawn lets her know that it is in fact him, Al. Granny can't believe what's happened and realizes that it is in fact Al, but finds herself being quite fearful of it. He then tells her that she was right all along in her beliefs about the afterlife. Granny Blake was a very devout Christian, and of course Al Simmons was an atheist. He then tells her that, she's got a place waiting for her in heaven because of what a wonderful person she is. She says that she's happy to know that and that she can't wait to meet Al there, but he then tells her that he's not going to be there, as his life was not one of, servitude or bringing glory to God. It was that of, pain and misery and hurting other people and being self-centered. She, however, interrupts and states that he died a hero and that he did good work, and that there's no way that God would send him back to her just to tell her that she was going to heaven and he wasn't. Spawn, however, is coming here for comfort, not just from that aspect of her, but he also wants to know about Wanda and if she ever seems to miss him. Granny says that of course that she does, that she and Wanda get together on a weekly basis and often talk about Al, and that she can hear that Wanda still loves him in the tone of her voice and the way that she speaks about him. Upon hearing this, Spawn seems satisfied that, at least Wanda still has a remembrance of him, and he just kind of, slowly walks away and thanks Granny for her input and tells her that she's a wonderful woman and, ends the conversation with God bless you. It's really a very somber moment in this book series. It's this idea of Al coming to terms with the fact that what he chalked up to superstition was in fact true, and now he's unfortunately having to deal with the consequences of the decisions that he made while he was alive. And also the fact that despite him and Granny never really fully agreeing with one another in terms of religious belief, that she was someone he really cared about and loved, and that, he never felt as though she was in any way ever really like judging him or looking down on him, and that he admired her so much that he came to her in need of comfort, even in, this state of having gone to hell and then come back as this, soldier in training or general in training of hell's armies, and is just still kind of grasping for that, just that little bit of comfort that she can offer him. Here on the next page, we are once again shown the 3 television reporters. Todd still using the E Entertainment Television logo and the CNN logo. I don't recall how long he does that before he finally gets a cease and desist from both of those companies. However, our good friend Thurston Burns, once again working for a different network. This is a common theme throughout the at least the early days of Spawn, where Thurston's always working for a different network because he's always delivering hot takes that get him in trouble, I guess is the joke. Uh, at the top, we see who is supposed to be Connie Chung, I'd imagine, giving a report about, just things that have been going on, crime that's been happening around the city, spottings of overt kill that happened a week ago in New York City, which means there's only 1 week of time that passes between issue number 6 and issue number 12 of Spawn, which I found really shocking that, the chronology is that close together for 6 issues in a row. It's really weird how much story they're trying to pack and how slowly time is moving in such a long span of issues. But, it seems to work, at least in my opinion. And there is the idea that Spawn did at least spend 1 issue in purgatory, so who knows how time was passing in that. We then move down to Thurston's report, where he's kind of making mention of the gangs that were featured in issue number 11, talking about how they're using advanced weaponry and that, they should be just dealing with this with their fists. And then at the end here in the E! Entertainment report, we get a little blip about how the biography of Al Simmons has been purchased to be made into a film, and also a little blip about Bedrock being potentially, Bedrock and Youngblood potentially being in legal trouble with Hanna-Barbera over the name Bedrock and some sort of copyright infringement. We'll get back to that in another couple of pages. We then move over into the 12th precinct in New York City, where we are brought into a conversation between Sam and Twitch, who are basically on desk duty until the investigation over the death of Billy Kincaid has been finalized. For those of you who do not recall, Billy Kincaid was murdered by Spawn because he was going around murdering children. However, Sam and Twitch both knew that Billy was not to be trusted when he was released on good behavior, and were trying to prevent him from killing more victims. However, they didn't have the ability to just go and arrest him since they couldn't pin anything on him. Spawn, however, doesn't work within the confines of the law, and as soon as he realized what Billy was doing, he decided to just go ahead and kill Billy and then leave his body strung up in Sam and Twitch's office, which has led to them being investigated by Internal Affairs. This, of course, has Sam angry as he's just screaming and yelling, not really happy about the fact that they're stuck on desk duty. Twitch tries to calm him down and tell him that there's no way that any of this can be linked to either of the two of them, and that once the investigation's over, the both of them will be reinstated. Sam then starts to get a little bit irritated with Twitch, saying, he's sorry that he can't just be as happy and as upbeat as Twitch is, and Twitch tries to tell him that, it's only because he realizes that they have nothing to fear and that the two of them are going to be back out on the streets, basically busting bad guys in no time. So Sam decides to very sarcastically put a big goofy grin on his face and say, "Hey, how do you like me now? I'm all super happy. Isn't that better, Twitch?" And Twitch responds that he actually lives for seeing Sam get into these very sarcastic and, witty type of moments. Also, we can see here, this is a lot of what I was talking about in issue 11. We can see here 3 full panels on this page, but none of them have any backgrounds drawn on them. It's just a solid color in all of them. Then on the next page, we are teleported to Wanda and Cyan as they're walking through their neighborhood on their way home. Wanda trying to help teach Cyan how to talk as they're just kind of going over things about her day, and, Cyan saying that, she likes her dog and would like a bottle of juice, and, Wanda trying to give her the whole, what do you say, please, thank you, this kind of thing. Just a little joyous interaction between a mother and her daughter. They, however, are interrupted from behind when Terry Fitzgerald sees the two of them and decides to run up and start goofing around and playing with his daughter as he scoops her up and throws her up into the air, We then see the three of them embracing, kind of just illustrating how much of a loving family they are, as Cyan indicates that she wants to go home, so they get together and start to walk back towards the house. And we then see that we're about to take a look at a insert poster by one Rob Liefeld. And of course, that insert poster is of Blood Wolf. Look at him, being all crazy and over the top. If you'd like to know more about Blood Wolf, please feel free to check out my videos on both Darker Image #1 and Blood Wolf #1. We see then that the next issue is going to have a Spawn poster by one Walter Simonson. And then we see that Terry and Wanda, as they walk to their home, notice a couple of black-suited government agents standing at their door. They, of course, don't see anything wrong with this, as, once again, Terry does work for the CIA, so it's not that uncommon that he would run into agents in his day-to-day life. Wanda takes Cyan into the house to make her some lunch, and Terry, thinking that everything is on the up and up and A-OK, turns around and asks what he can do politely for the two government agents. However, they respond with the cliche, beautiful family you have there, it'd be real bad if something ever happened to him line, kind of indicating that things are about to get a little bit tough for Terry and Wanda's lives. Back in Washington, D.C., in the office of Jason Wynn, we see that the two men who intimidated Terry are making their report, letting Jason know that they delivered the message. Jason, of course, is very happy about this and tells the two men that they're going to keep around-the-clock surveillance on Terry to see how he reacts to this and perhaps catch him in some illicit dealings that he's doing or something of the like that they can use to basically ruin him. We're then teleported back to Hell's Kitchen and the alleyways of New York City as we see all of the homeless men that Spawn lives with loudly singing the theme song to the Flintstones. Now, as I stated before, I would get back to the whole idea of Hanna-Barbera and Youngblood and legal action. For a long time, I believed, and many others believed, that this was a bit of a commentary being made about something that was happening in real life. However, that's not the case. Hanna-Barbera made no actual contact or threatened any kind of legal action against Rob Liefeld for use of the name Bedrock for his character. Honestly, I don't think they would have had any real legal claim, as Bedrock is an actual term used to describe, something that's, geological. It's not something that has any kind of way that it can be copywritten or trademarked, at least as far as I'm aware. However, I did a little digging online and found that the reason Bedrock's name changed to Badrock is because Rob, after seeing that they were going to be producing and making a Flintstones movie in 1992, and I think the movie released in 93, but I can't remember exactly, was of the belief that he would, get some sort of a cease and desist or face some kind of legal actions by Hanna-Barbera or perhaps Warner Brothers, who was their parent company at the time, and I believe still is. Yeah, they still are. But, Todd really didn't think there would be a problem and felt like Rob was just being paranoid. So this is honestly just kind of a little joke that Todd's making and kind of taking a little jab at Rob for what he believes is, unnecessary paranoia about potential legal troubles. We then see Spawn pounding down some wine as the rest of the men continue to talk and make jokes with each other. They are just having a fun time, and it's nice to see Spawn kind of cut loose. They even mention that he seems like he's in a good mood. He states that he's exorcised some demons, kind of stating that, he's feeling better after having his conversation with Grandma Blake. As we see the skyline and the men laughing, one of them belches very loud, and then they laugh once again. One of the men needs to relieve himself and walks away from the group to do so, and after finishing, sees Spawn's mask lying on top of a trash can. He decides to put it on in a joking fashion, kind of goofing around with the other men in the alleyway, saying, look how tough I seem now. Do you think I could be a superhero? Unfortunately, the mask is apparently not amused by this, as it quickly covers his mouth and then begins to suffocate him. Spawn, realizing what is happening, wastes no time in rushing across the alleyway to grab the mask and pull it off of his head so that his friend doesn't die. He then apologizes profusely, telling him that there's no control that he has directly over the costume, and that it oftentimes will react violently to what it perceives as a threat. Thankfully for Spawn, the man seems to be, you know, none the worse for wear, and just kind of shakes it off and makes a joke about it. And the other men, have a little bit of a laugh as a result. Spawn then states that he does appreciate the humor and the levity that the men have, but also then gives them a stern warning that his costume is dangerous, and he doesn't know why it reacted that way, and he doesn't know, whether or not he can always control it or, prevent it from reacting that way to any of them. But he feels like he absolutely needs it. Of course, he doesn't realize at this point that he can't exactly take it off. So he just tells them that from this point forward, they really need to be careful, and they need to just leave any part of his costume or his mask, if they find it lying around, alone for their own safety. And as he walks away from the crowd, he suddenly stopped in his tracks, feeling the effects of the alcohol a little bit, but is slammed with another vision of his past. However, this one is very clear, as he realizes that the visions of his funeral were not about his casket, but about the flag that was on top, as this flag represents the employer of a certain individual who is responsible for Spawn's death, as he realizes that the imagery that he's been seeing of all the different skulls weren't of skeletons, and they weren't of a mask, but more precisely, they were about face paint. And the reason that he keeps being drawn back to the church isn't because it's a church or a cathedral, but because it's something else. And that something was a name, specifically the name Chapel, who we find out was the one who murdered Spawn. At least for a while, because unfortunately they end up having to retcon this entire story point in the future due to some behind the scenes stuff that was happening at Image, and some upheavals within the company, and Rob Liefeld leaving Image, and him not allowing the rest of the creators to utilize his creations anymore. And it sucks, because honestly, this was such a cool slow burn that was very, in my opinion, well done. Of like, they were really giving you the clues for this entire run that Chapel was definitely the guy that killed Spawn, or Al Simmons, I should say, but never in a way that made it super obvious. Like, and especially, only getting these clues here and there between issues that were months apart. It was done well, and it was something that most people didn't see coming. But it all kinds of falls apart because, so are the pitfalls of being an independent publisher where everyone owns their own characters. When you start doing, crossover stuff like this, it can change at a moment's notice if one of those people decides to leave and take all their creations with them, and then suddenly you're referencing characters that you can't reference anymore, or, you can't, use them ever again, or all the kind of stuff that goes along with that. I wish it could have stayed this way, but unfortunately it had to change. We then move on to the spawning grounds. Nothing really special in this issue. More so just, run-of-the-mill type of a lot of praise letters, but also some that are critical, and some that are asking some pretty deep questions. As we see the second page of the spawning grounds and also Image intro, one of the letters that stuck out to me was someone bringing up the point that, they felt Todd was being a little too critical in issue number 10 of Spawn, stating that the characters that were in prison had been sold by their creators, and kind of, thought that Todd was being harsh in that sense, being that when you work for Marvel or DC, you never own any of the characters you create. However, Todd points out that was the symbolism behind all of the creators who had bags tied over their heads. They also had their hands bound behind their back, kind of to show that they were, being suppressed and that they were doing the work they wanted to do, but they were also, essentially wearing golden handcuffs in that they were being paid for it, but they weren't able to own anything they created. I thought it was a really cool little, symbolism, or a little cool point of symbolism that a lot of people missed, and I was glad that it got explained in the letter section of this book. We then see another page of image info. I'm kind of surprised. Usually it's just one page. And then image fan art, as we see a picture of Voodoo, Super Patriot, the Max, and one down here of Spawn and Savage Dragon. We then continue on to the next page to see some more. Here we see an image of the Max, Spawn, Bloodwolf, Chapel, Grifter, Pit, and Shadowhawk. Then one of just Spawn, one of Angela, one of Brigade, one of Pit with Timmy. And this is actually the one I like the most. It's probably hard to see on the screen, but this is actually a pretty detailed image of Spawn over a bed of skulls with his cape open up, and he's in a pretty cool pose. I really like what was done with this fan-submitted artwork. Then on the reverse inside cover, we see the one and only advertisement in the entire book of Showcase Sealers. As I brought up, I believe in the last episode of Spawn, Showcase Sealers still exist. I think they're pretty cool. I don't own any, but I am probably going to buy some for a few of the books I have that I think have really cool covers on them just to display. It's a really unique idea, and I do like these. They're not like the same kind of protective case that you get with something from like CGC or something. Like, it doesn't have the UV protection and all that stuff in it, but it is kind of cool having this little plastic display case that you can hang on your wall to display your comic books as just, regular artwork throughout your home. And that was Spawn issue number 12. I apologize for how long this video ended up being. I wasn't planning on making it that long, but man, Todd covered a lot of story elements in this book, and to his credit, I think he did it pretty well. At no point does it really seem confusing. It's a really good way to try and recap the readers as to what's going on. Or if you're just getting into Spawn at this point, he did a pretty good job of explaining the story thus far. Like I said, the 2 pages where Spawn goes and visits Granny Blake, I thought were really well written and really illustrated the sympathetic nature of the Spawn character, and Al now having to come to terms with all the mistakes that he's made throughout his life and realizing that he could have done things better while he was alive, and realizing that one of the people who was closest to him was kind of, trying to guide him towards that, and he didn't really, pay attention to the things that she was trying to teach him. But overall, like I said, I thought this was a really good issue. I thought it was very well put together. And despite the fact that the Chapel storyline ends up having to be retconned later on, doesn't change the fact that up until this point, it is a really cool reveal. And where they take that storyline in the future for the little time that it does have an effect on Spawn is well done as well, in my opinion. But again, these are just my opinions. Your opinions may differ. You might have thought this issue was terrible. But if you have a different opinion, that's okay, because everybody's entitled to their own opinion. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.